So welcome back. As you can see, we have Wayne McRoy as a guest, and our topic of the day will be dehumanization. What do you think? Is that like a mind virus? Is there something not well connected in our brains?
Well, certainly, you could say something like that. You could equate it to a mind virus of sorts because it does seem to be contagious in a certain sense or fashion. And all of this, of course, goes back to the science of social engineering. They've been trying to construct this for a very long time. The dehumanization process, it's something that dictators and rulers across the course of history have used against their people for the longest of times now. And we're seeing a manifestation of that, like that has really kicked up to next level here in the modern age right now in the times we're living in. So certainly what they want you to do is to think of a people group other than yourself that you don't necessarily resonate with or have a lot of commonalities with. They want you to think of them as kind of subhuman or less than human, or to, at the very least, think that somehow your culture is superior to theirs, and therefore you don't really give them that full type of respect as a human being. And this is something that all of these dictators and rulers of all sorts throughout the course of time have utilized and weaponized against the masses, their own people inclusive. Because what this does is this further helps to set up this division among the masses. And if we have division, then we become in a situation where we're fighting with other fellow citizens and fellow human beings over things that don't really matter, things that aren't necessarily so important in the long run. And we're focused on that rather than looking at what the controllers of this world are doing, and they're moving the pieces around all the time. So if they craft a narrative and put it in the media, whereas this people group is doing this and to this people group, and you have that dehumanization process sinking in and it spreads across the culture like a virus, then you have people in that mindset where you want them, that frame of mind where they're focused on this over here instead of what the policy think tanks and stuff are promoting and pushing forward, because they use that to bring about the next synthesis of what they're trying to produce. So we see this goes back into the auspices of occultism too. They've used these same types of methodologies for time immemorial, since time immemorial, on mankind. And of course, this falls back to the ruling class and all of the things they do to try to maintain their grip on power in this world. And it's much of the same today. It's just on a much grander level because we're all so interconnected in this modern era of technology. So we see more of it on a grander scale, and they're trying to weaponize nation versus nation and people group versus people group to the point where it's just in your face all the time. And they've reignited the seeds of racism, especially in Western culture now, as a result of this. And this is something like if you've been alive as long as I have, if you lived through the 80s and 90s, I thought by the 1990s, the whole notion of racism was just a thing of the past. And we had gotten past that. Now, sure, were there like racial jokes and stuff that showed up once in a while? Yeah. But it wasn't like as much of a problem as it is now. And it's only since about the past 10, 15 years or so that this has really been reignited in the greater Western culture as a whole. But we always have these types of notions that go into the control structure in this way because they need us divided along various lines to maintain control. It's the Hegelian dialectic, once again, the classic Hegelian model that they use for control. They leverage two polarized sides against each other to maintain some type of a standard that moves towards the center where they could steer it and direct it how they need to at any given time so that they could implement the policies that they want. And certainly we're seeing that playing out in spades in front of our eyes. And a lot of people right now have forgotten about the things that were said at the World Economic Forum just a few short years ago. And all of the focus now is on the Trump administration here in the US and all the things they're doing, this Agenda 2025 stuff that's come up, and all of that that has to do with the policy think tank groups on the extreme right wing here and all the things they're implementing. And of course, we're seeing pushback with that now. They just elected a new mayor in New York City for the first time who's a Muslim. And it's just a mess. And this is all just part of the politicalization of all of it and the polarization that they've put in place to create this dehumanized state of mind for the masses. So we see a lot of that going on here in the USA. And I know they have similar things going on in London and in Paris and all sorts of places like that, all across the world, especially the Western culture world, where they're installing Muslims into high offices that have never been present there before. And this is all leading in a particular direction. And we might get to that during this conversation or not. But certainly it all has to do with this whole campaign of dehumanization. So we have all of that to consider when we look at this. So I don't know which way you want to go next with this, the more political ideology or towards the occult thinking on it. How do you want to approach it?
Yeah, I would, sorry, definitely would like to go into the occult, but what? Okay, but we have also, you know, in early 2001, I guess it was, there was a study, and they compared thought patterns between people on the Spanish Peninsula and the Canary Islands. Yeah. You would think, yeah, well, they are both Spanish, so the differences will not be so great. But what came out, they had to choose. They offered uh, primary emotions and then secondary emotions. And when it came to the primary emotions, it was pretty equal how each group saw each other. But when it came to the secondary emotions, then the people were of the opinion that those emotions applied more to them than the other group. So do you think it's possible that it starts a little bit earlier? I'm not doubting that from the top there is a lot engineered, but that was one case that I found really interesting and somewhat disturbing.
Well, yeah, I would say it all falls back on human psychology, and the controllers of this world know human psychology inside and out. This harkens back to a proclivity in mankind to develop a notion of tribalism.
Mm,
And I'm familiar with this group of people. This is who I resonate with. This is where I'm from. This is where I'm focused. So, anybody from outside of this group, there's just something inherently in human psychology that makes you approach them differently or think about them differently. They're not from the same tribe. And this is something that's been manipulated by all of the classic dictators, and I don't know if I should call them classic, but I mean, if you go back through history, all of these people who have arrived in political positions of power, they've taken advantage of that tribalism that is inherent in mankind. It's one of our proclivities that we have that goes back to antiquity, and there's a reason for that that's described in the secret doctrine. And a lot of this is where some of these ideas come from and where they've utilized and leveraged these principles from. So it falls back into the occult, just like everything else. So this is something that has been leveraged and will continue to be leveraged by those people in power because they're aware of this. They know we like to pick teams. Therefore, usually how they do it is by using this Hegelian control mechanism where they give us two choices to choose from. You pick team A or team B. Therefore, that's how they steer and direct things. It's all about this polarization principle, the duality principle. All this ties back into these occult thought forms. It's all about manufacturing some type of new synthesis by the reconciliation of opposites. And this is what they always do. It's the control mechanism. It is the blueprint for doing things. And a lot of this eventually does lead to this dehumanization process because of that inherent proclivity in the human being to have this form of tribalism. They identify with their tribe, and therefore they have a little bit of suspicion or distrust for anybody that comes from outside of that tribe until they have earned that trust or that respect from that other people group. So this is something they take advantage of. They want you at odds with somebody else. They will go ahead and use things like media to spread disinformation about certain other people groups. Like they'll tell you all kinds of things, especially here in the US, I've noticed this, about other countries around the world and things happening there. They'll tell you things that are just blatantly false about that. And you have a preconceived notion as to what it is that people group believes. And therefore, you approach it with that preconceived notion, and it doesn't always align with your own values or your own culture. So you walk in with this bias out of the gate, and that makes it a lot harder, first of all, to connect with that other person from that other people group. And secondly, it leads to this thinking of them as somewhat lesser than yourself. That ideology, the dehumanization process, it all ties back into these classic tropes of mind control. And that's what a lot of it is. It's mind control. And they use mass media to get this done today. That's wherein we see a big difference right now. They used to do it only in small sections or quarters at a time, like one racial group versus another in a small area. Well, now it's worldwide. I mean, they have the tools to manufacture this dissent worldwide, and they continue to do that right now. And they use mass media to get it done. And they use this global interconnectivity to get all of that done. So we have all of these different ideas that circulate, especially here in Western culture. And there are other cultures that aren't necessarily as affected by the propaganda as we are in Western culture, because they simply don't have the access to the technologies and stuff like we do to the degree that we do. So they don't see it as much. So if you go somewhere like, say, Africa, they're not as affected by this proclivity of the propaganda that we're fed. So they don't necessarily have some of these preconceived notions that are fed through the media screen every day to people about other people groups.
But
Now, of
they're
course, I'm
very
sure
tribal.
they are very tribal, and they do sometimes get some of that information fed to them from the outside, somebody who has seen some news report or something like that, and that affects them and gives them that preconceived notion. But they're not inundated with it like we are in Western culture. So it's not built upon, if you understand what I mean. Like it's constantly something they're building through use of media in Western culture. And there's a build-up process that goes on in order to lead people in a certain direction. And we're seeing that happening in real time right now. And of course, what they're doing is they're trying to pit Western culture and, say, the religious ideologies surrounding Christianity against those with Islam. And they're feeding into that. Now, does this create some real world problems? Oh, you betcha it does. And that they know this perfectly well. And they're trying to feed this, and they're trying to provocateur this type of dissension between people here in the West. And we've seen that slowly beginning to creep in. This is what I'm talking about with the buildup in major cities in some of these Western countries, like London. They installed a Muslim mayor. And now here in New York City, they've installed a Muslim mayor. And this is creating a lot of backlash on social media. And if you don't think they're monitoring that, you're sadly and sorely mistaken. They most certainly are. And that's what they're looking for. They want to provoke a reaction from people. They want us reactionary. They don't want us to use critical thinking. They want us to react. That's how they control us, like an animal. They want you in that reactive state all the time. So they will feed you all of this buildup towards a problem, and then they'll begin to unleash part of that problem upon you. And they have a ready-made solution. And it always invariably involves the giving away of more of your rights and taking more of your money to bring their solution into fruition. And it always, always has to do with tying you to some type of a digital control grid, excuse me. And that's the end game. That's what they're looking for. They want us all tied and locked into their system. So they're going to use all of this to get that done, this playing people off against each other because they have ideologies that differ from one another. Well, the world would be pretty boring if we all agreed on everything. And I think that we need to have our differences in order to get along, and we could still get along and maintain that ability to agree to disagree on things. But that's been slowly and carefully engineered out of Western culture in recent years. They want you to think in terms, if this person doesn't agree with me, they're my enemy. And haven't they done that very effectively? Like, people can't talk anymore, have an adult conversation without flying off the handle and getting insulted with one another if they don't agree on things. It's ridiculous. We need to get past that. That's all part of this dehumanization ploy.
Yeah. And I think that it was especially pronounced starting with COVID. Yeah, you had one group that gobbled up anything that politicians and the media said. You had the other group that were questioning things, and a lot of things didn't make quite sense to them. And then, of course, the media came out, and here in Germany, and yeah, called them dangerous, those people who questioned the narrative. Yeah, and you got the impression as if this particular group is out to kill the rest of them because they are not going along. Okay, then shortly after that, we were presented with Ukraine and Russia. Yeah, and I remember very well in the very first days, everywhere, even on our Bundestag, there were the Ukrainian flag was raised. And if you even dared to mention, well, there is a prelude to this situation, and yes, Russia attacked, and yes, legally, that is not okay, but it has a prelude, and maybe we can look at that as well, how we ended up there. And then, of course, you were a Putin supporter. Yeah, you were not even allowed to mention that. And yeah, and then, of course, came Israel and Gaza. And there is a lot to be said for both sides in terms of their insanity. And yeah, but once again, always this offering, pick a side, pick a side. And I refuse to pick a side.
Right. And that's the whole thing in a nutshell. And COVID was the biggest psychological operation ever pulled off on humanity that we've known about it, that's been recorded here. So that in and of itself was transformational in the world today. The world is changed because of all of that in very major ways as well. And it's always this pick a side. They give you two options. You'll notice there's never any more than two options, and any other options that they give you that is like a third option or something like that, it's just to strengthen one side or the other that they give you in this two-party political system. First of all, that's the best example we have of that, is the way the political systems work. They give you right wing and left wing, but they fail to mention to you that it's the same bird that those wings both belong to, and it's going to go in the direction it's going to go in, regardless of what you're looking for. It's just whatever steers it to the center better and moves forward or promotes their agenda in the most expedient way. That's what they do. So they utilize these polarity principles in that way, and certainly we see the results of that. They give you two sides, and if you don't agree to pick a side in this, well, then you're just bad. You're dangerous. And this was how it was with the whole COVID thing. How dare you question the narrative? How dare you question it? Don't you know these people have your health and your best interests in mind? Just shut up and wear your mask and go get your shot and and we'll give you free donuts. And then you could go shopping and make sure you maintain social distance from each other, follow the one-way arrows on the floor. They did some absolutely ridiculous nonsense during COVID, and they expected people to not question it. And if you did, well, then you were dangerous, and they deplatformed you. I don't know how many people I know personally that have been deplatformed, and I've been affected by it too. You get shadow bans, you get channels removed, you get your content pulled down, you get strikes, you get demonetized, all of this stuff. If you just speak the truth or question the narrative, ask the questions. It's just asking the question. And they have a problem with that. That's because they want to dehumanize people. And COVID dehumanized people in ways they hadn't previously been able to possibly utilize before. There was a reason they did that 6 feet distancing between people. And this has to do with the connection of our auric bodies with that, the information field around us, the aura of man, the electrical system around man. And you could scoff at that stuff and say it's nonsense if you'd like, but I assure you it's not. I mean, this has been scientifically measured that we have this electrical field around us that we actually project from ourselves outward from our body. There's a real notion to it. And just as an example to give credibility to this, have you ever been in a situation where you just felt somebody was standing behind you? There was no way you could know that, right? Because you're not facing that direction. But you just intrinsically know somebody's there, and you turn around and sure enough, there they are. You sense their presence. This is an example of that. It's because we have this electric field around us, and there's a reason they kept us that 6 feet distance from one another during that time. It's because this electric field extends out from us about 3 feet. So they don't want you having that energetic field overlapping. Because if you do, that gives you a type of connection to the other person. Physical proximity to somebody gives you a connection of sorts. And this is what they're trying to leverage with that principle. They kept people separated so that you are suspicious of that human being. You don't feel the resonance from their electrical field in yours and understand, okay, maybe they're friendly, maybe they're more like me than they're not. You don't get that impression. You don't have that sense from that because of the physical distancing. And when you look at somebody and you can't even see their face is covered with a mask, that makes you all the more suspicious. You see, it hits on some archetypal things in the human unconscious mind. When they cover their face, it's the unknown, and man intrinsically has a fear of the unknown. So that's what that leveraged on, that fear, that suspicion, that mistrust. So they did all of that, and they utilized this in tandem across the world. And that's the mind-boggling thing. All the nations of the world accepted this, and those that didn't, well, their leaders met suspicious ends all of a sudden and were replaced with people who did go along with it. It's interesting that happened too, right? But of course, I'm a conspiracy theorist if I bring that up. But like, facts are facts are facts. And we see that. That's demonstrable. That was actually done. That had happened. They died under suspicious circumstances, and all of a sudden, okay, the new administration's here, and they're going to follow all these protocols and go along with the World Health Organization. And now we're seeing some very real harms from some of these policies in the world, and it has transformed the world in ways that we previously would not have thought of before. So now they've successfully implanted this mimetic theme of dehumanization in the human unconscious mind and in the greater zeitgeist at this point. So it's there, it's present, and now they're just trying to amplify that. The distrust, the seeds of distrust were sown during COVID, and now we have that. And even if you questioned the narrative and you were calling out the BS that they were pulling off, the seed has been sown that way too, because now more people are actually waking up and seeing all of this was implemented and it was wrong. And now they mistrust their governments more or distrust their governments more. There's more seeds of division. The ruling class and the ruled class, there's a division between them too. And that's all been sown in there too. They want distrust sown into the people because it's part of the dehumanization process. And this happens from the high echelons all the way down the board to the low echelons. So that's part of the programming that's been done. So that's a perfect example of how that's been implemented in a way unseen in this world before, prior to the onset of this COVID scamdemic that they played on the people.
Yeah.
And in the process, they also managed to roll out biological weapons, like systems against people, eugenics weapons against people, that largely they accepted on faith and trust. And now a lot of them are regretting that.
Yeah. And this type of rhetoric, if you, for instance, what is very, very pronounced here in Germany is whenever you have a different idea than your government, you are automatically, you are a right-wing extremist, you are a Nazi, and on it goes. And just one example, we have here in Germany one political party called AfD, and media and politicians do not get tired to warn everybody that they are all Nazis, yeah, which is total nonsense. Most of them came out of CDU, yeah, the fake conservative party that we have here. So, and that rhetoric over years. Now, last week, one of the leaders of this particular party, he had his car burned down by Antifa, and it burned so bad that three other cars from his neighbors were set ablaze as well, completely ruined. And that has been his fifth car in 1 year that has been destroyed. And that is exactly what this rhetoric leads to. Because we have already figured out that you are bad and we have labeled you with right wing and Nazi, and this is why we are the good ones when we destroy your property, when we attack your health and life. And it is completely justified because in our sick minds, we tell ourselves that you are the bad vermins that have to be eradicated. You know what I mean?
Oh, absolutely. It's the same thing as invoking for the greater good. And isn't
Yeah,
that what they did during COVID too? It's for the
yeah,
greater
yeah.
good. You're a grandma killer if you don't go out and get your vaccine and wear your mask. They see how they weaponize all of that. They weaponize these ideologies, and you're absolutely correct. This rhetoric has been manufactured specifically for that, to affect the average person in thinking in these ways and to feel that they're justified, because that other side, those guys that differ from me in opinion, they're bad and we're good. So therefore, our actions that harm them are justified because they're bad, they're evil. And I've actually heard the term evil invoked many times in the political spectrum these days when one applies the ideology of the other in certain perspectives. So they see it as being evil and they're battling evil. So they're justified in their actions, even though the actions they're taking in and of themselves are just as bad, or if not worse. They feel justified in doing so. And this is all part of sowing the seeds of dissension within the people. And all of this has, of course, to do with this dehumanization process. Because when you look at a figure, specifically like a political figure, and you have all of this rhetorical hatred focused towards them, you forget they're an actual human being. They're a person who has a life outside of the political theater. They have a family a lot of times. They have children they care about. There's things that they do in their own time. They're a human being. They have feelings. They have their own lives that go on outside the public sphere of attention. And people forget that. And they just think that this figure is the center of all evil. And they therefore focus their attacks on that. And a lot of this is done on purpose. And this rhetoric is created on purpose. And this is highlighted perfectly, allegorically, in the book 1984. Remember, Orwell wrote in 1984 that every day the people would have to center their attention on a video screen for 2 minutes each day. This was called the 2-minute hate. And they would put up the picture of Emmanuel Goldstein, and they would curse, and they would throw things at the screen, and they would focus all of their hatred and their negative energy on that figure. Well, they've done the same thing with many political offices in the real world here today. This is where you focus your hate, and there's an occult concept to this. It's called the scapegoat. This is the scapegoat. They want you to focus all of your negative energy towards this scapegoat because this deflects blame to that scapegoat for the things going on from the people who are really promulgating the problems. And this is what they utilize. So they'll use the office of, say, the presidency of the United States, and it doesn't matter which party they belong to. That's where the focus goes in the political theater of things in the world. So you have all of this attention all the time here in the U.S. on Trump. And it's mostly negative because that's the way the media always portrays it. Because there's the agenda. You see, this is all agenda driven. This is how they use this rhetoric to incite people against one another. So those who actually are for the things that the Trump administration is doing or like some of the policies, well, they get all offended and upset at these ones that just don't seem to understand what he's doing is the right thing. They're the bad guys, the ones that are throwing all this hate. And they focused a lot of this centrally into the mainstream media. So now you have a lot of people who support Trump are beginning to wake up to the fact that the media is controlled and the media is bad. Well, that's only part of the picture here. And the other side of it is the media constantly feeds to the people who can't stand Trump more and more things to incite their anger and hatred. He is the perfect scapegoat. He does his job well when you understand that his job is to focus the attention on himself and to provoke these negative feelings from people towards himself. He's a master at it. Excuse me. Choking here. Marina Abramovich described him as a perfect black magician, and she's not wrong. He is. Trump is a magician of sorts because he can incite these reactions from people. He knows just what to say and just what to do to make people either love him or hate him. There's no middle ground with this guy. Either you can't stand him or you love him. And that is what he has actually invoked into the American sphere of politics right now, in the political theater. He's the perfect scapegoat. He's the perfect figure for this job. And they know it. And that's why they put him in for a second time. Even though they took a break. And I have my theories as to why this was done, first of all. And maybe we could talk about that if you're interested in pursuing the avenue of thought of how they steer and direct things by invoking the polarities on both sides to bring about the synthesis of what they're really looking for. So we could go there if you want. I don't know what direction you want to head next.
Yeah, sure. If you already mentioned you have a suspicion, so go ahead. Tell us why you think that is.
All right. Well, I think a lot of this actually came about in Bilderberg 2016 when J.D. Vance was present at Bilderberg in 2016. But most people don't know that. He was there. He was at the meeting in Chantilly, Virginia. Trump was there too. I think this is where the real people who call the shots in this world told him, hey, we're going to have you lose the presidency here. And we're going to give it to Joe Biden for a 4-year stint. And the reason for that is because we need to use the Democrat Party to initiate certain things into the greater culture for that 4 years. And we need a fall guy. And Joe is not the swiftest, and he's got the dementia. So we're going to put him in office so we could deflect blame for things. But then we're going to put you back in charge after that short little stint for a while. I think this is where that was decided at Bilderberg 2016. I've actually done some broadcasts about this in the past. So I suspect that this is what happened. And their reason for doing that is because under Trump being in the Republican Party, there was only so much he could pull off. And he was getting a lot of heat from the mainstream press because they don't like him. There is there is a faction in the greater power structure at the highest most levels that don't like Trump, but they begrudgingly had to hand over power to him. And they still don't like it, and they try to do things to undermine him because there's infighting at the topmost levels of control in this world as well. They fight and argue sometimes, and they disagree on how to get things done. So sometimes they trade power back and forth. So they begrudgingly let Trump be in charge, and they're still taking jabs at him even unto today. But he does get the job done, and they know that, and they begrudgingly recognize that. So they let him do the things he does and say the stupid crap that he goes out in public and says, because it draws the attention to him. And when the focus and the attention is on him, then the policymakers could quietly do what they want in the background without people really noticing because they're focused on Trump. So that's what's happened as far as that goes. But they had to scale back some of what Trump was doing in his first term. And they let him know in no uncertain terms, come your second term when it comes up here, we have certain policies and things we want put in place. And he's working towards those now. And we see Biden was put into the position he was for that 4 years in order to open up the borders here, let the influx of immigrants come in, to bloat the social security system and the safety net, the social safety net systems that we have here, and cause an escalation, even more so than the COVID nonsense did, in inflation, runaway inflation, and the devaluation of the dollar. So this was all set cascading into motion. And then that was the only way people, by and large, would accept a second Trump presidency, is because he's coming forward with some fiscal goals and financial goals, and he's a businessman, and therefore they're looking to try to get the economy back in shape. And well, the economy is still in shambles, but he has instituted some policies that may help. I don't know. We'll see over the course of time if the policies he puts in place helps the average person. I'm not suspecting it will, because that's not what they put these people in charge to do. They want to tank the economies. They want to bring into being the synthesis of this new world order system. They want digital currency. They want a digital ID system that everybody's tied to, and they want it to be worldwide. And that's the whole thing that we're facing right now. So it's all about globalization, and it's all about some of the policies the World Economic Forum publicly talked about in years past. And now you'll notice they've kind of quite more or less disappeared from people's attention. They seem to be out of the picture, especially here in the US, as far as people are concerned. They're not paying attention to that anymore because they reinstalled Trump into office, and he separated from the World Health Organization. He separated from the climate treaty and all of these other things that by and large people inherently know are wrong and bad. But this was a logical move for the power structure because they want people to believe, okay, Trump's our guy. He's getting us away from all this globalization nonsense, all of these World Economic Forum policies and stuff like that. So now they're not so concerned with it, so they're not paying attention. You see how this works? So he kind of has garnered a little bit of trust in that direction with a lot of the people, especially the right-wing conservative wing of things that don't want anything to do with those policies. And he's rolled back certain things that were implemented during the Biden administration here, social policies and things like that people largely disagreed with. And there's a little bit of common sense has stepped back into the public framework. But that's all in order to steer us back toward the middle. You see what they did when they put Biden in charge here. They let everything skew to the extreme left wing. And then that caused all kinds of problems here on the home front in the U.S. And because of those problems, they were able to get Trump back in office. So now he's steering it back towards the center. And they try to frame that up as many of the policies being extreme right wing when they're really not. And that's where they get back to this centrist ideology, back to common sense ideas. But it's only for a short-lived time, because I assure you, once Trump's presidency is over, there very likely is going to be a left-wing president put in, and he's going to be a very much more social radical than what we've seen in the past. He or she, I should say. I don't know. We'll see. I don't see any potential candidates on the horizon right now that look like they'd be able to fulfill the job from the left wing. But you never know. All of these elections and stuff are all rigged anyway. We all know that. So it's just a matter of the semantics of it. It's political theater, but it's all about implementing their policies. So they're snapping it back towards the right or the conservative view right now because that's where they're going to get their policies passed quietly behind the scenes. And that's something they always do. They play the opposites together to get synthesis. So they play the polarized opposites against each other. So you'll notice that many of the more right-wing leaning policies were implemented during Democrat or left-wing administrations. Same with the right wing. You'll notice there's more left-wing or Democratic type things passed during a right-wing administration. This is on purpose. This is because the people are distracted. They're looking in the wrong place, and they're deflecting their blame for the policies in the wrong place. The policies are actually provided and designed by think tank groups who are not elected officials. And this is the real power structure of the world. These are the ones that set things into motion and actually decide where we're going. So you have places like the World Economic Forum that meet in secret and they discuss ideas, and then they set their little minions in place into these political offices, and they draft laws, and they say, here you go, we gave you this campaign financing and got you in this office. Here's the bill we want you to pass. They write the bill, and they literally hand the bill to the person, to the senator or whatever that they got in place. Here you go, introduce this bill. And they never read the bill, and they bring it out into Congress, and money talks, and that's where it's at. So they control the policy through the control of money. And did not Rothschild tell us, I care not about your laws, allow me control of your country's money, and I'll control the policy of the nation. So this is something that's been going on for a long time. And we see how it's been weaponized against the masses at large. And we have this notion of the scapegoat that seems to be central to all of it. It's where you direct your energy, your negative energy, to. And that's all played off of for very occult purposes. So we have all of that. I know I just talked at length there, and sometimes I like go on and on and on. So save me from myself.
Yeah. So, from what I'm hearing, you are not of the opinion that J.D. Vance will be the next president.
It's hard to say for sure. There's a reason he was present at Bilderberg 2016, and there's also a reason why he's the vice president today. So he may actually play a role in a future administration. Maybe he will run for president at some point. I don't think it's going to be directly following up Trump. Now, I do reserve the right to be wrong on that. But I'm pretty sure the way things are shaking up in the mainstream media right now, that they're going to push and promote a Democrat back into the office of presidency once Trump's term is up. And maybe Trump will actually declare a state of emergency or something and prevent himself from being ousted. I don't know. That's all possible too. That's all been in the works, and that he's been publicly talking about maybe running for a third term and changing the law and this kind of thing and becoming president again for another term. It's hard to tell. It's hard to know what's going to happen. But you see how they use these principles against the people, and there's a reason why. It's always the two-party system. It's how they steer and direct the social energy in the direction they want to achieve their policies.
Yeah. Although I have to say, I don't see anybody on the Democratic side right now. Newsom, I don't know. He's not somebody that I find very sympathetic. No.
No, that's the thing. I don't really see any front runners available right now. But there's still a couple of years to go yet. And who knows, maybe some new firebrand, like, say, a Zoran Mamdani or something like that, might actually be a breakout star to these socialists and these Democrats and these left-wingers, to the point where they might get enough of a push
Yeah,
to actually get elected.
Yeah, Obama was unknown before he announced his candidacy as well.
Exactly.
And out of the
Exactly.
blue, there he was.
Yeah, and that's a very similar story to the J.D. Vance thing. He was present at Bilderberg prior to him becoming president. Same thing went on. So he was kind of handpicked by them. And this is going to be the new face of the Democrat Party. And this is the guy that's going to get it done. And he was just a freshman senator at that point. He had just got elected in the Senate at that point when he began to run for president. And he was a relative unknown. And all of a sudden, he's been escalated to this superstar figure. And then he won the presidency and he was in for 8 years and he did an irreparable amount of harm to this country in the process. And people just loved him because he was kind of charismatic and well spoken. And for the first time, we had a black president. And a lot of people put a lot of stock into that, even though Bill Clinton claimed to be the first black president. But that's a story for
What?
another day. Bill Clinton claimed to be the first black president. You never heard that before? It was
No.
actually a trope that went around for a long time back in the 1990s when he was the president. But I digress on that point. People could go and look into that if they would like.
Mm. Yeah. And especially in, I think at this point, a lot of Americans have hoped for a little bit more financial and economic relief, and somehow it is not coming, you know?
Yeah, that's because they've devalued the dollar to the point where it's the bottom's about ready to fall out, and people just can't seem to see it or wrap their head around it. That this is what's coming. This is what was designed. It's designed for collapse. And when the collapse comes, well, don't worry, they will have a rescue plan in place. But that rescue plan is not going to benefit you ultimately because it has to do with universal basic income and digital currency and digital ID to get you in the grid and on the books and under control. And they have all the infrastructure going in place right now for that via guys like Peter Thiel with Palantir and various other groups. So the infrastructure is going in. And of course, you'll notice they're building all these giant AI data centers everywhere now, especially here in the US.
Mm-hmm.
There's a bunch of them going in, and that's what this is for. You see, it's all about the beast system. It's all about getting people on digital ID, on digital currency, and having this universal basic income, which is tied to their biometric data, their genomic data, all of it, medical records, everything encapsulated into one central utility controlled and regulated by AI. And you will also have a publicly known social credit score. They already have social credit scores on all of us here in the West already. They just haven't put the infrastructure completely in place and haven't gone public with it yet. But it's coming. And they will use that in order to shut off your money if you become problematic to the government narrative, or if you're disobedient, you don't do what you're supposed to, you don't go get your 15th COVID booster, they'll shut off your bank account so you can't eat, and they'll control where you go. They have talked about the 15-minute city notion and all of that too. That's all part of this digital panopticon control grid that they want to put in place. And that's where their solution will be. So when the bottom falls out and your money's worthless and you can't get the goods and services you need in order to live, well, they'll swoop in and come to the rescue with this digital universal basic income. And they'll
Mm.
tell you, you could spend this money on rent and food or some combination of these things, these necessities, and you can't use it for anything else because it's programmable digital money. And it'll have an expiration date, by the way. So you can't bank it and save it either. They don't want you to have a savings. This is all part of the design. This is the plans they have. They have actual white papers that have been out for years now talking about doing this stuff. This
Mm.
is what Klaus Schwab was saying when he said, you'll own nothing and you'll be happy. They don't want you to be able to accumulate a savings. They don't want you to own anything. They don't want you to own your own real estate or property or home or anything like that. You're going to have a monthly charge for services in order to utilize that facility. It'll be like eternal rent, where you'll be able to rent that. And they'll provide you some money towards that, a subsistence living towards that universal basic income. but you'll only be able to use it for certain things. And after a certain date, if you don't use it, it'll be gone. It's programmable digital currency. They have test runs of this going on right now in many of the cultures around the world. If you're not familiar with the food stamps program here in America, what they do right now, they have this, they call it SNAP. I'm sure you may have heard about this
Yeah,
because
and
that's a
there are
big thing.
snap lootings, yeah.
Yeah. So right now the government's shut down. So SNAP benefits are gone. They can't fund the program. So 42 million Americans are on this SNAP program and are dependent upon it in order to eat. Now that's hugely troubling in and of itself because that's more than 10% of the population is on this SNAP relief benefits for this to buy food. Well, what they do is they give you a little card with an ID number, and you go in the store and you buy all of these products, and it knows what products you can buy and what ones you can't. It's only supposed to be used for food items and stuff like that. So you could use this, and that'll cover that expense. And they give you X amount of dollars in a month's time, and you could use it to buy food. Well, this is kind of a prototype for what's coming with the universal basic income because they could tell you what you can and can't buy, and they could program that card to only cover what it's supposed to cover, and it's only got a finite amount of money on it. And additionally, what they don't do just yet with Snap, but I see it coming in the near future, is this will have an expiration date on it. If you don't use up this money by this certain date, it's gone and you don't have it anymore. Well, this is what they're going to do. It's a programmable digital currency, and it's going to be tied directly to your biometric ID, your medical records, everything about you, every bit of data about you, and they have tons of data on you. So therefore, if you put a post on Facebook that they don't like, well, you're locked out of your bank account until such time as you remove that post. This kind of thing. It's been a meme that's gone around, but it's true. I mean, they've talked about this. China was the test run for this. They have already in place a social credit score system in portions of China. And you could find videos about this even on YouTube, some places, where you could see what it is. They might not be able to buy groceries if they had said something criticizing to the regime in place or anything like that, or if they had done certain things. Well, they have punishments and they lose X amount of points from their social credit score, and it locks them out of certain goods or services. So you can't get on a public transit bus. You can't fly on an airplane if your social credit score is too low. These kind of things. And it's a reality in parts of the world right now. And it's going to be rolled out globally by the time these nut jobs are done doing what they want to do. And this is
Yeah.
how they're planning on doing it. Collapse the economy, tank it all, and then come in as the savior and rescue people with universal basic income and prop them back up and buy up their mortgage and own their property, and they will just pay you X amount of dollars in rent every month. And this is how they plan on doing it. It's an insidious thing, and there's white papers talking about it for years and years
Yeah.
now. I've been warning people about it for a long time.
But I think they wanted to go much further with COVID. It didn't work out like they would have loved to do. Yeah.
Oh, I agree. Yeah.
And so you could say, I mean, for a lot of people, it was clear from day one what was really going on. And but then once things started rolling, the narrative collapsed bit by bit by bit by bit until, yeah, we had here the RKI files. That is our, no, what, CDC. So I still have a little bit of optimism that I do not doubt what you just described, that that is the plan. What I do doubt is that it will pan out as they thought, because I am so sure that they wanted to, wrap it all up during that particular time with the microbe, and it didn't work. It,
I
it
agree. I agree with you 100%. Things didn't pan out exactly how they wanted during that time frame.
mm,
And they're beginning to see a lot more backlash because of that, because they inadvertently woke up an awful lot of people to what was going on, because they tried so hard, because they knew their time's running short. That's the thing. They wanted to try and get all this stuff in place as quickly as possible. And you'll notice a lot of this plays back to the Agenda 2030
mm,
stuff that they had talked about. And if you'll recall, Agenda 2030 used to be called Agenda 21, and they wanted to have that in place by the year 2000. They didn't get there. They overestimated what they'd be able to get done. Well, they did the same thing with this Agenda 2030, but they so desperately want to get all of these things in place by 2030 that they pushed way too hard during this COVID stuff, and they woke up a lot of people that they weren't planning on waking up at that time. It was an inadvertent thing. And there's a reason why they chose 2030 as this year and that they want to get things done by. And that has to do with, well, what some in the occult are calling a mass awakening or the Great Awakening. And there is something very much going on where we are entering into a new time or a new era of where people are becoming more spiritually aware than what they were in just some past years. And I think the controllers of this world very much knew that this was coming and were trying to stave it off before we got to that point where people were beginning to wake up en masse to what they've been doing in the dark for untold generations now. And I
mm.
think it's a little too late, and they're pushing to try to still get this stuff in place. But the good news is there's a large enough minority that's awake and aware of it all that we've been able to stave off a lot of what they're doing. And I do have hope that we could actually topple their whole entire plan and scheme. So I'm thinking people like us are making a difference, even though they're doing everything in their power to try to censor us and block us and shadow ban us everywhere. We're making a difference and we're having an impact. And there's enough of us out there speaking out to this stuff that they've had a real backlash to it that they weren't expecting.
Yeah.
So, according to their own statistics, and I use this as a benchmark so that we can know, according to their own statistics, 69% of the world population got at least one COVID shot. Now, that's a massive number, but the good news is they need a parietal split of 80%, 20% in order to be able to roll out agendas without resistance in the way that they want to. And we're way above that 20% threshold, with 31% being awake to this and not capitulating to it. And that's massively good news. And that 31% is beginning to wake up a larger percentage now of people that have buyer's remorse for the things they've done in response to the whole COVID campaign that was unleashed on the world. So
Mm.
that is good news. And I do have hope that we can overcome their schemes, because that's what these are. These are schemes.
Yeah. So, our first hour is already gone, and I would like to go more into the scapegoat archetype and also have a look at this Azazel character. So, we will see the patrons on the other side.